Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we share knowledge from global experts in how to create high-performance, agile cultures of continuous improvement and innovation. Cultures where employees wake up smiling and excited to go to work and make a difference. Cultures where leaders feel they have the time to proactively serve the growth of themselves and others.
I'm your host, Jeavons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. By improving our organisations, we create a better future for generations to come. An economy where our children and grandchildren can experience the joy of owning their first home. An environment where they can enjoy holidays on clean beaches and marvel at the beauty of nature. A future where they feel safe, respected, and empowered to make a difference at work, bringing that energy home to their families and communities. This show is proudly brought to you by the Enterprise Excellence Community and Group, which is focused on helping organisations create this better future through this podcast, our community, where you can engage with global experts, tour best practice sites, and also our workshops focused on the most important topics to truly help your organisation improve into the future for those it serves. Visit enterpriseexcellencegroup.com.au to learn more. We've got a great episode coming up today with Mr. David Cooke. We're looking at his new book focused on kind business. It's a great episode. You're going to gain so much from it. Really, the essence of how do you achieve excellence in an organisation through culture change and truly creating amazing outcomes for the longer term. Let's get into the show. Welcome to episode 203 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Dr. David Cooke on the show with us today. David is the author of Kind Business, How Values Create Value, which was a finalist in the Social Responsibility and General Business categories in the 2024 Australian Business Book Awards. David in this book advocates for the well-being of people and the planet to be based at the heart of leadership decisions. We're going to explore this book and more today in the show. Let's get into it. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Brad. Thanks very much for inviting me on the show.
Such a pleasure. Now, David, the big question I got is, what led you to write the book, Kind Business, in today's world?
Well, look, I'd spent 35 years in the corporate world, largely in the tech industry. I worked for Xerox in the 80s and Canon in the 90s, and then 15 years actually with Konica Minolta, another Japanese tech company, where I finished up as the managing director for 8 years. And I think it's fair to say during my time, I pretty much saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of the corporate world. And to be honest, it never made sense to me as to why all companies weren't really trying to be good, weren't trying to have a good positive impact on society, weren't treating their people well, weren't completely honest and open and transparent with their customers. And I certainly tried to apply those principles once I was the managing director. And so when I stepped away from full-time corporate life, I just decided I'd kind of codify everything I'd learned, if you like, and put it down in a book, which I did. And it covers those three parts: business behaving badly; second part, those exemplars, those wonderful leaders who really get it; and then the third part was a small part on a case study of Konica Minolta itself.
Wow. And David, the companies that you got to work in through your career and then also become a senior leader in, they're quite amazing companies. So what you would have seen through their journey, but then I guess the corporate world you were involved in just would have been, so you would have seen the big contrasts in culture and everything that you've seen.
Yeah, there's a big cultural contrast, if you like, between Japanese way of doing things and Australian or Western way of doing things. We're trained in different business schools, and the Japanese system very much is based on a hierarchical system of respect for your boss, the person above you. And obviously in Western business, respect is important as well, but at the same time, things like sort of innovation and left field thinking and brainstorming and being curious and questioning, all of those things are very valued as well. So at times, that would create a few challenges, perhaps for my boss in Tokyo, managing me sitting there in Sydney, Australia. but that's all part of the wonderful aspect, I think, of getting to a senior level in a company. But also just over time, I saw massive changes as well, and the world's moving a lot more quickly now, I think, than ever before, and that presents challenges and opportunities as well.
Yeah, I could imagine it like an amazing career. David, like one key question I've got is that the subtitle of the book is How Values Create Value. Like, what is at the core of this statement?
Yeah, so essentially, how values create value really is saying in another phrase, if you like, that if a business does good, then the business will do well. If the business contributes positively to people's lives and to the community, then that business will actually thrive. So the two things are linked. Whereas some people in the past have previously had the misunderstanding that concepts like purpose and profit are at opposite ends of the spectrum, and you have to decide which one you're going to focus on. Whereas I actually believe purpose and profit are part of a virtuous circle. And the more profit you make, the more good things you can do for your people and society. And the more purpose and positive approach that you have in contributing to the community, then the more profit you'll make. And that's essentially what that phrase means. And interestingly enough, one of the case studies I have in the book is a research study by McKinsey, the global consulting firm. And in that study, they looked at the S&P 500, or the US stock exchange, if you like. And in 1958, and they wanted to look at what was the average amount of time that those companies had existed for. And the answer was 61 years. So on average, they were founded in 1897. They then looked at the average length of time that the companies on the S&P 500 in 2023, the year of the study, had existed. And they were shocked to find that it was down from 61 years to 18 years. In other words, companies were they were being founded, they were becoming top 500, and then they were disappearing. And they then thought, well, let's extend this study. Let's look at what the S&P 500 might look like in just 4 years' time in 2027 if business doesn't change the way it's doing business. And they extrapolated out that 75% of the companies that existed in 2023 simply will no longer exist in 4 years' time. So it's as if business was kind of consuming itself. Capitalism was eating itself, if you like, with this absolutely short-term focus on profit at the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah, it's crazy times with that major change that's happening there. Dan, one thing I love that you mention, and I believe in it so much too, and is the win-win between purpose and profit. I guess myself, I'm so passionate about when companies deploy operational excellence. It can be done so well with considering the planet and people and the profit that comes from it. And I've seen the best journeys happen in that way, the ones that sustain and get results, where when it's just about profit, it typically goes, well, it always goes wrong. And I just love hearing it from yourself that you've got that real statement that there is a clear win-win there between those, and you've seen it.
Yes, thanks, Brad. Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of obvious in a way, isn't it? I mean, I think as consumers or as businesses deciding who they want to deal with, who they want to partner with for different aspects that they need in the company, you're going to choose companies and organizations, I think, that you trust, that are treating you honestly, they're open, they're transparent, they have good values, they have good morals. They're the sort of people that you want as friends. They're the sort of values you want to instill in your kids. They're the sort of companies you want to do business with. So it's as I said at the outset, it's never made sense to me as to why you would go down a different path, other than if you just have an extremely short-term focus, and you're not actually concerned about building that business. You're just concerned about, the next quarter, the next year, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And David, like organizations at the moment are heavily in this short term, make profit, hit the next quarter, go again, go again. To shift from that, where it becomes longer term thinking, we're really leaning into purpose, we're leaning into values to create value. How would you recommend organizations go about it to actually improve?
Well, I think it just starts with an acknowledgement that your ecosphere is very broad. Um, Now, you should always reward the shareholders who have invested and risked their money in buying shares in your company. They should be rewarded well, but they're only one member of your ecosphere. And I think companies need to shift from a mindset of shareholder primacy to stakeholder primacy and value equally their customers, value equally the people who work there, value equally regulators, the community. These are all part of a company's ecosphere. And I think that's the main shift that organizations need to take. And then they'll be rewarded for that. And interestingly, if you look back for those listeners of the podcast who are old enough to remember the great captains of industry in the 80s and the 90s, the name that probably comes to mind is Jack Welch. He was this global CEO of General Electric, and nobody was ever able to drive short-term profits like Jack. He just had an amazing knack of doing that. But he did it by decimating entire communities, whole townships, whole states in the US, in the Midwest, by massive factory closures and redundancies and shifting all the work offshore and so on and so on. And interestingly, post his corporate career, when he retired, and it was actually post the global financial crisis as well, he looked back and he made the statement, um, a pure focus on shareholder returns is the dumbest idea in the world, essentially saying for his entire career, he just got it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many examples like that, aren't there, that we can look back on. And they were glorified in their time, weren't they? Like how many books did Jack put out? But you look at it and it's like you can see the train wreck that was at play. And one of my good friends, actually my neighbor, he saw the demise of, GE through the 90s and into the noughties, unfortunately. And it's coming back now with a lot more focus on a broader ecosphere, which I love that because an organization, there's more to that organization system than just shareholders, isn't it? And the purpose often sits in that broader ecosphere. And that's what motivates people. It's amazing when you think about it, all so simple. But why do you feel like leaders don't think about this bigger picture and the win-win results that can drive for them and their organization into the long term?
Well, look, I think regrettably, we have some very fine leaders of companies in Australia, but we also have some that are just adhering to an old status quo model. Often, just driven by a financial background, give me the numbers, that's all I really care about, without actually understanding that it's the people that get you the numbers. So if you just ask yourself, do we want the best people possible to work in our organization, the best and the brightest minds? The answer is, of course, well, yeah, sure we do. Otherwise, they're going to work for the opposition. How do we get them to work here? It's not, the answer is not on a spreadsheet. The answer is to be found through cultural change within the organization. And that's where people with empathy and more heart than simply mind, people with both heart and mind, are the people building out truly great companies. And regrettably, still on a lot of ASX boards, the old expression that Australian boards are pale, male, and stale is still alive and well. We need much greater diversity on the boards of our ASX listed companies. We need directors who can speak about people. We need directors who can speak about climate and the environment and human rights on those boards, not just financial and legal experts.
Mm. It's so simple when we talk about it. It's for organizations to get better, they need the great people. For organizations to get better, they need motivation. What motivates people is making a difference,
Yes,
typically. There is a
yeah,
portion of people where it's just about the money and what can I get for myself. But in general, that's the minority, not the majority. But you're right. It starts with the boards and the senior leadership teams. David, what's your thoughts on boards and senior leadership teams? The understanding of the powerful shadow they've got. Do you feel in general that the understanding is out there, particularly in Australia, of the shadow, how powerful their behavior is, what they say and what people see them do and what people hear about them doing, setting such a tone for the culture of the organization?
I don't think they understand the breadth of it. I think too many directors, and I don't want to bash up, boards here, but I think too many directors, read the briefing papers, walk into the boardroom for the monthly meeting, close the door behind them, have a pretty standard discussion, um, walk out and close the door behind them again. I don't think they fully understand the impact they could be having. That they'll focus on the impact on the dollars. But I'm a great advocate for any director in Australia arriving early for the board meeting if it's held on premises of the company, and going and sitting in the lunchroom or the internal cafe. Get there half an hour earlier, make a coffee. As people walk in to get their afternoon coffee or morning coffee, whatever it might be, just say to them, listen, would you mind if I just had a chat to you while you have your coffee? I'm one of the directors of the company, and I just really want to connect with the people who work here so I can understand what it's like. Because, sitting in that boardroom is not going to teach me a hell of a amount about the company. And if they do that, if with the permission of the executive, if they travel around to different branches, Gail Kelly, when she was managing director of Westpac, famously, I think might be one morning a month, would get out of the office and she'd go and stand in bank queues. The people who were waiting to be served by the teller in the days when we did banking in physical premises. And she'd introduce herself and say, "Can you tell me what it's like to be a customer of Westpac?" I find that that level of awareness to be so encouraging, but regrettably, it's not something a lot of very senior directors feel comfortable doing.
Mm. Yeah, there is. There's two parts of it. They've never done it before, so don't have the habit. And the other thing is, do they see that it is an important thing for them to do?
Mm.
The challenge we've got is that the shadow they cast is so big because how they behave with that leadership team will set a tone, and then how that leadership team behaves with their middle management will set a tone, and it will tell everyone what's important. Like, is what important? Is it to just chase the dollar and just no matter what you do, chase the dollar? Which is actually, as you said, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face because it's not chasing the dollar that gets you the dollar, but
Okay.
it's what they need to do is that's such a great point is get out and go to where things happen with customers or with employees. We call that look, listen, learn engagements. Go look, listen, learn where it counts, and it sounds like such a great starting point for any board or senior leader looking to figure out how to improve what they do.
Yes, and you made an interesting point too, that these people are very, very senior. They're highly competent in their particular specialty, whatever that might be on the board. Um, but what we're asking them to do is to learn a new skill. And sometimes when you kind of feel you've reached the top, your openness to learning a new skill and going through that discomfort is not necessarily there. So that's when people fall back to the status quo, stick to the knitting, turn up for the meeting, leave the meeting, job done.
Yeah, it is. It's too true. And I guess the key is for us all to want to create great companies so that everything that flows from that is so good. Like organizations, they play such a big part in our economy, such a big part in people's lives because we spend most of our time at work, play such a big part in environmental impact or environmental positiveness. But yeah, right from the top, we've got to learn some new habits if we want to shift our companies. The challenge I see, David, is that like if I look at it, I'd pose it's not a big investment for a senior company to really start to move because it basically comes down to helping the board and the senior leadership team start to lead values to create value. But typically they spend a fortune on certain consulting firms to more come in and do full analysis and then come in and do what they got to do. Whereas it's actually start to shift your company. If you are a senior leader or on a board, it's very simple. It's the old look in the mirror, isn't it? And then, well, go to the front, go to that
Mhm.
customer queue or go to the front and then look in the mirror.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, Brad. And look, I think the greatest leadership lesson I learned in those 35 years was that listening is probably the greatest strength that any leader can possess. And my appointment as the managing director of Konica Minolta was a bit of a left field one because for 40 years the company had always had a Japanese managing director in Australia. And then I was appointed. And at that particular conference, when it was announced, I walked up on stage and I said to everybody, I want us all to work together to build a company that cares about the people who work here, that cares about our customers, and that cares about our community. And the next morning, I walked into work where I'd been working as the general manager of sales, but not the MD. And so this is the first time as the person running the company. And I sent an email to everybody in the company and I said, look, not all of you were able to be at that conference, but this was my vision statement, if you want to call it that. And there's only one problem. I don't know how to do it, and I need your help. And we sent out a questionnaire and we asked for their ideas on what needed to change. Now, I probably broke all the management rules there because the textbook would probably say you've just been appointed, you've got to give them confidence that the right decision has been made, you know what you're doing, you've got a plan, you're going to roll out the plan. I did the opposite. I said, I haven't got a plan, you've got to help me to build the plan. But it was a stroke of genius in the sense that in that hierarchical environment, people had never been asked previously what they thought because that was deemed to be a show of weakness. So people were just dying to tell me what they thought. And we got 800 ideas back. We implemented many of them. And people were a part of that. You know, they were their ideas. They weren't mine. They'd come percolating up rather than being pushed top down. And look, we're in the industry of hardware devices, printing and copying and so on, as well as the start of the document management journey for those companies. And it was that part of the business was a declining industry. People were printing less and copying less. So globally, the businesses were in decline, but in Australia, our business grew every single year, year on year. And I put that down to the fact that it wasn't one senior leadership team making the decisions. It was every single person that worked in that company being invited to help with those decisions.
Yeah, well, that's the power of it, isn't it, Dave? That's such a great story and how you brought everyone into that vision or that meaningful vision or purpose, and then actually gained everyone's voice on how we do it. It's cares is such a powerful word, isn't it? Because it's like you can tell so many stories off of that. Is care for customers, care for people, care for the planet. Right? What do we do? It's that is a beautiful word. I love that and what you
Mm.
did there and how you engaged everyone to then draw out their thoughts because there was a lot of meaning to that. And so I'm guessing the ideas you got through were quite amazing.
Yes, well, interestingly, one or two members of the executive team, when I told them I wanted to do this on my first morning as MD in the office, said, we don't advise that because people are going to ask for ridiculous things, much more money and double the salary and all this kind of stuff, and you're not going to be able to give it to them. And you're just going to create disappointment. So you're going down the wrong path there. And I just had the conviction, I don't think they will. I think they'll actually kind of stand in our shoes and take a very broad look at this. And interestingly, the most requested category, if you like, that came back in those 800 ideas was better communication. It had been very poor, and that was very easy to fix. I got out and about. The financial results, et cetera, and set up mechanisms for people to communicate very widely. But the second most asked for category was purpose. Give us more purpose. And when we went back and said, well, this word's cropping up a lot. What does it mean to you? give us some more detail. Um, they asked for us to start a program of charity partners. Now, most other companies were doing it, but we weren't. They wanted volunteering days off. They wanted salary match giving for those charity partners. They want us to take on some causes and just step out publicly as a company that wanted to make a positive contribution to the community. And it was, honestly, it was palpable, the feeling, the atmosphere in the company going from a little bit sterile, I have to say, a little bit stale, off to something far more exciting.
Yeah. I love it, David. I love how you got that feedback from the employees, but you also went to go deep on it. Okay, so what does purpose mean? What does communication mean? And then you went about it. That is very powerful. I sometimes see companies get leadership teams get back feedback, communicate, and it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna pump more emails out, or I'm just gonna do more pure town halls and talk down to people.
Yeah.
And it's where it's so powerful what you mentioned that you got that feedback, but you actually went to understand it more, then you took action, which is really cool.
Yeah,
It's a great,
thank
great
you, Grant.
approach.
And I mentioned before that sort of one of my top tips would be, that listening is one of the most powerful characteristics of leadership. But I would also say another one is curiosity. When somebody puts an idea on the table, or even if somebody completely disputes what you're saying and the wisdom of what you're saying, or even if somebody attacks you, um, I think the next thing that comes out of your mouth should be a question.
Yeah,
Could you help me to understand that better, please?
yeah. Tell me more. Tell me
Tell me
more.
more.
That's so cool. And it really, there's a few simple behaviors here we've been talking about, haven't we, from a leadership perspective that can just really help start to shift an organization and create that better future. But David, what one question I've got for you is like, what's been a recent insight for you on this journey you've been on and, getting the book out there around kind business and all the talking events and work you've been doing? What's been a recent insight?
Well, to pick up on the word recent insight, I would say it's never, ever been more important in the history of the corporate world, for businesses to stay the course, of being true to their values. So if you believe that you're a business with integrity and honesty and you're an ethical business and so on, now is the time to demonstrate it. Because with geopolitical events happening at the moment, there have been some very large global corporations completely backing away and retreating from what we can call ESG, environmental, social, and governance initiatives. And so they're abandoning their programs of fairness and equity for everybody in the company and in the community. They're abandoning the action they were taking on climate change and so on, and they're retreating from that. And I think that shows, I was going to say weak leadership. That's an oxymoron in a way. If you have leadership, by definition, it should be strong, and that's the only characteristic. But I think what I've been observing is that those companies with strong leaders, people of conviction, those businesses will thrive in the long term, and those who just adopt certain policies or values pinned on the boardroom wall, but they tear them down and change the values when the heat comes into the kitchen. Those businesses are the ones that won't be around in the future.
Mm, yeah. And I love that comment you made on that earlier, David, too. A lot of business is like having the right talent, the best talent. And that's two parts, isn't it? It's people wanting to work for your organization, but it's also to having people in your organization that have been there a while and have grown even more capability. Without that great culture where people know that you're mean more than just a dollar, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that, and you're not going to truly. It's like the ultimate leading factor, isn't it? It's like great culture, great place that people want to work. People stay there, people grow their capability and get better and better. The company gets better and better. It's
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if I can just, we're probably over time, but if I can tell a very quick story. Um,
yeah.
when I did become managing director, I invited a little while into that role, I invited everybody who'd been in the company for 25 years or more to come to Sydney, and I took them out to dinner just to say thank you. It was cheap and cheerful, just in a public restaurant. And at the end of that dinner, one man said, "Could I please say something?" He was a very quiet man. He hadn't spoken all evening. And he was a field service engineer, one of those people that come in and fix your device when it's not working properly. And he said, "Look, I've worked here for more than 25 years, but during that time, I'd never told anybody where I worked. I just didn't see the point. It was just a job I went to where I did a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, and that's how I fed my family." And he said, "But now I tell every single person I meet that I work for Konica Minolta. And why do I do that? Because I feel so proud to work for an organization that would care about vulnerable people in society and actually form charity partnerships with organizations who are working on their behalf. And that's why I've kept working here, and that's why I feel so proud of this company." Now, I think if you speak to any leader and say, "What's the Holy Grail?" they'll say getting everybody fully engaged in the company's mission. And it's not that easy. But here we saw a man, and I would have had 50 other people over my 8 years as managing director come and say something similar, where the engagement dial went from disengaged to fully engaged, and it kept going to strong vocal public advocacy for his employer. And it's not that common, but it's achieved through trying to be a good company and giving something back to the community. And your people will respect that. They'll see it. They'll really love it.
Yeah, it's amazing, David, and I so appreciate the whole conversation today because on this podcast we're about creating cultures of enterprise excellence so we create a better future, and it's so much about that culture and people and customers and the planet and the bigger aspects that truly drive results in the ideal results that you're looking for. That's where the profit comes from. But like you said, it's then wonderful to put that profit into causes that are meaningful. So I really appreciate your knowledge and your insights and everything you have done and continue to do. How can people reach out to you, David, to learn more or get hold of the book?
Yes, well, speaking of the book, there it is.
Nice.
um, and you can have any bookstore in Australia can order it in for you if they don't have it. It's available also through all the online retailers, Booktopia, and all the people you'd be familiar with. It's an audio book and it's an ebook as well for people who prefer consuming content in that way. They can also just jump on my website, which talks about a lot of the public speaking that I do. That's esgadvisory.com.au. And I'd really welcome anybody connecting with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm there as Dr. David Cooke, Cooke with an E on the end. And I'd very much welcome you to connect, and you'll see me share my thoughts there.
Well, David, thank you. And thank you for this show and everything you have done and continue to do. Thanks for helping us create a better future, mate.
Now, thank you very much, Brad, and thank you for the podcasts that you're doing.
Cheers, David. Bye for now.
Bye.
What a great episode. David's kindly given us a link to his YouTube channel where you can go to learn more about David. Just check out youtube.com/@DavidCooke with an E dash ESG. The episode for me was a really amazing one when you look at how to truly shift culture and drive long-term lasting business that's bigger than just profits. And it's the things that actually get profit. The first key takeaway for me was the piece on leadership, going to the front line, going to customers, going to employees and just learning, listening and learning. I reflect back to Chris Butterworth's episode on Look, Listen, Learn and the key skills there. And from that learning, you look at how to really improve and create that better culture and performance. The second key takeaway for me was the discussion with David around basically hiring great people, retaining great people. And in order to do that, that's where purpose and culture is so important, and how you create that great culture where people want to stay and want to keep growing and learning more through that organization to create that great organization for the longer term. On the opposite, where you get more of a toxic culture, where we're not focused on that kind organization and truly one that cares, we'll lose people, lose knowledge, and then through that, lose company performance more and more. What a brilliant episode. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, David. Appreciate you helping us create a better future. Bye for now.